Hello and welcome to episode 3 of The Second Messiah. On the last episode, Vithericus managed to corner and destroy a Roman legion using a hill advantage and superior troops to wipe out this small portion of the Romans' army. Meanwhile, Saphrax has almost reached his destination of Attila, moving up the coast and getting pretty close to some serious Roman gold. Vithericus continued his rampage against the Romans, hunting down some more smaller Roman forces to destroy them and prevent them from pursuing him. Again, he used superior terrain and a massive charge to wipe out the Romans very quickly in what was quite an easy battle for the Gothic forces. But his luck didn't last that long. The Romans had more and more troops and poured them into the pursuit of Vithericus until he was cornered, forced to face a battle where he has a massive disadvantage. The battle was very close, his forces were almost broken, he had to draw his sword himself and fight in the fray. Luckily, after a chaotic and widespread battle, we managed to defeat the Romans and hang on. But then Saphrax faced a similar fate. A massive Western Roman Empire army of heavy spearmen presses against him. Trapped against the coast, he had to fight them. The battle has just begun, the enemy have engaged our front lines and have already broken through our first line of light forces in front of the main fighters, so the main fight is about to begin. Saphrax's main line fighting against the Roman forces is certainly inferior in terms of numbers and equipment, but is superior to the enemy in terms of raw fighting skill, giving us a good chance of holding the enemy, but the enemy still have their overwhelming numbers to push through and outflank my units, making it a very dangerous situation. On the flank, I've got one axe squad holding off the enemy's spearmen, whilst the rest of them have been distracted chasing my cavalry. That's ideal for me. I'd much rather just draw those spearmen away from the battle than engage them with anything, so the cavalry are going to try and do that. Meanwhile, in the centre, you can see enemy units are starting to break against my Gothic warband, who are doing very well, but are unfortunately starting to get cut down by the sustained missile fire from the enemy's skirmishers. Their javelins are particularly effective against my infantry. Plus, as you can see here, they're being outflanked quite easily. I've still got my light spears holding on but getting overwhelmed by the enemy's heavier troops. I just need to hold those guys in position to stop myself from being completely outflanked, so they're doing a great job so far using the spear wall to increase their defensive abilities. In the centre you can see loads of enemy units piling against one of mine. My guys still managing to hold them off. Their left flank's totally exposed, but the enemy aren't really exploiting that gap right now, so we're doing okay. Meanwhile, right over on the left, you can see I've got two more spear lines holding off against the enemy's spear troops. Our guys are not doing too badly, actually. The enemy spears have failed to get through them, and both units are still pretty coherent in terms of formation. We are being slightly attacked in the rear there, but overall they're actually defeating enemy units, so it's looking pretty good. Now, my very exposed right flank, which the enemy have totally outflanked with multiple units, is the main worry for me. I'm trying to use skirmishers to draw the enemy away in that particular case. You can see the enemy spearmen are still chasing my cav, and some of their swordsmen actually quit the central engagement to chase them as well, which is ideal. So now these skirmishers are going to try and do the same thing, drawing these spearmen away from the main fight. I only get one regiment attracted, meaning two more go to attack the back of my army. This means Saphrax has to go and fight with them in melee with his guards. There's nothing left. The man himself will have to hold out. Now, these guards actually are surprisingly bad in melee, but they have very high health and armor, so although they're unlikely to kill many enemies, they'll hold on for quite a long time. Here's Saphrax himself with the brown coat and without the tassel on his helmet, not fighting quite at the front, so the risk of him dying isn't massive, but of course every second he's fighting there is a risk. We need to try and save him if we can, and that means winning out in other places on the battlefield, which here in the centre we are just about doing. You see the Gothic warband have just defeated these enemy swordsmen with most of their unit still intact, so they're now going to be able to go around and help out. Although, it looks like missile fire affecting both sides negatively there. Anyway, so the enemy are running away, and I'm quickly doing the same, moving my troops back to go and support other units nearby. I'm also starting to lose out here on the right flank, so my cavalry have come in to fight with the enemy's general, essentially locking them down. Actually, the cavalry can fight quite well with the enemy's general, only swordsmen. And whilst the enemy are locked down, my archers focus on the general's unit, filling them with arrows and actually doing quite a lot of damage. And you can see those swordsmen who were just freed out the Gothic warband come in to help out. The archers probably don't have line of sight, but they'll fire anyway because the AI loves a bit of friendly fire. Anyways, the enemy's general unit routs, and then their general is killed. A key moment, the balance bar now shifting to be just about equal. This unit of spears comes in to join this fight just after the general falls, arriving just too late, so my Gothic warband immediately has to go into another fight, a fight where it has an advantage in terms of man-to-man power, and begins to cut the enemy down. So that's quite a good situation overall. So most of the main battle has now been decided. I still have a fair number of units left, despite the actual centre of my army being completely routed. The left is now going to fold to help the right, where Saphrax is still holding on against the enemy's troops. He himself is still alive in there somewhere. His guards aren't doing particularly well, not being all that good, but they are achieving their goal of just locking the enemy in place. And then, as you can see, the enemy suffer a chain rout. All of their remaining units, all very isolated and in separate parts of the battlefield, rout at once. So even though I wasn't really about to completely destroy them at this point, the enemy realised that they're probably not going to win in the long run. So my surviving units will now chase the enemy down and attempt to inflict maximum casualties so that we don't have to fight this army again in our weakened state. You see my archers actually inflicting friendly fire on my own pursuing forces there, killing the enemy as well, fortunately. Anyway, so that enemy army is now in enormous trouble. They're going to have very few survivors as they attempt to escape this battle. It's a Pyrrhic victory for Saphrax and his forces. Massive losses, including the losses of our best troops, similar to what Vithericus experienced in the last battle. But we've defeated the enemy. We've still got a chance to escape and survive. I knew it would not be easy, but I never thought we would come so close to destruction. We all took the cowardice of the Romans for weakness, but in reality they are still strong, but are calculating enough to withhold that strength for all but the most pressing needs. They surely realized we were coming for Rome. I don't think they will let us into Attila anytime soon, but nor do I think we will find safe haven without moving further west. But the Illyrian kingdom owes us enough to keep our people alive for now. We must build the strength to take from the world what we more than deserve. The question is whether to send word to our king. Perhaps some of you already have. All of you have your opinions on him after what he did. Some of you I know no longer consider him our king, but I do. I want nothing else than for him to give up his mad crusade and to join us. Together we would become the new masters of Rome with an ease that would shock the world. But if he learns that we are in jeopardy, in his state of mind, it will only make him sure that he is correct. Though I yearn to invite him back to us, it is a hard truth that he must make that decision for himself. Whether he will live until the day that happens is in the hands of the god he thinks he serves. I wouldn't make any demands of all you, but I for one shall pray for him. So the battle is won, but of course with large losses. Here on the results, you can see we only lost one full regiment, but most of our army is heavily damaged and definitely can't fight again. The Romans are even worse off though, losing pretty much everything. I can use take-on warriors to take some of the captives into my own force to start the path towards replenishment, but it's going to be many turns from now before this army is ready to fight again. So that means our advance towards Attila is probably going to have to be put on hold, so that I can move somewhere safe and attempt to get my army back together. A bit of good news though, another horde coming down from Dacia, the Basturnians, offers me a non-aggression pact with money, so they're willing to pay me to make sure I don't attack them. Wasn't planning to attack them anyway, so I'm very willing to accept this deal, a nice little financial boost to end this relatively chaotic turn for the Ostrogoths. So moving into the next turn, Vithericus is going to have to try and escape from the remains of the Eastern Roman Empire who he just barely defeated in the last episode. His force is in better shape than Vithericus is and of course has gone through a turn of replenishment, but I still want to get away from them and just sit somewhere safe like I do with Saphrax in order to get those troops back and further expand my power. So first I move back towards the Visigothic territory. They're my military ally and are also at war with the Eastern Roman Empire, so a perfect place for me to sit, and it's right next to where I was, conveniently. So I'm going to hide behind the town, set up an encampment so that the Romans will have to fight both of our forces in the vicinity if they do want to attack me, and I'll be replenishing troops. I can also now upgrade my Germanic Band into Germanic Warband. These are slightly better units basically, only partially better and quite a lot more expensive, so it seems like a little bit of a harsh trade-off, but I need to upgrade to these guys because they will be able to be upgraded into Gothic Warband in the future once I've got a few more turns of technology, which will be the unit that I generally want to use as my main line unit. Over with Saphrax, the survivors from the Roman Empire are just hanging around here, and I thought I might be able to just wipe them out if they don't run away, because I'll probably have a giant advantage. They do run away though, running off into the forest there, and I decided I probably won't bother chasing them. So what I want to do is to fall back towards my ally, the Illyrians, and use them for shelter while I regenerate troops. Unfortunately, I can't reach their territory this turn, so I'm not going to be regenerating anything for this turn. And of course, the Western Roman Empire could just come down and attack me while I'm still here in their territory without any punishment from the Illyrians. So it's a bit dangerous, but I'm going to have to try and get back to Illyria if I want to be safe in the coming turns. Now the Huns appear to invade the Eastern Roman Empire. Quite an opportune time. We see Eastern Roman Empire forces falling back in defeat, and then they raise that settlement to the southeast of Serdica. So the Romans appear to be in trouble. Very useful. This means Vithericus may just have an opening to sneak through, but of course we're also at war with the Huns. So I'm going to have to face both of them if I want to move through, and I can't really bet that they're going to destroy each other and let me through unharmed. So it's still going to be a dangerous journey. And speaking of danger, the Western Roman Empire show up to attack Saphrax as I had feared, bringing a massive force. It definitely outclasses him. He can only retreat a short distance to escape because of the river in his way. But luckily for me, the Western Roman Empire are out of movement points, or at least they choose not to pursue. So this means Saphrax is safe and now in Illyrian territory. We learn that the Council of Carthage has just concluded, meaning that the Christian doctrine has been somewhat solidified as to its general worldwide canon, and this spreads the Christian faith more quickly over the world. It doesn't affect us very much as a horde, but in the future we're going to encounter more Christians, which will probably be useful. Now I need to make some diplomacy with Illyria because they're not actually at war with the rest of the Roman Empire, so hiding in their territory won't do me that much good because they won't actually join battles if the Romans were to attack me. Luckily they were willing to accept some money to join this war. I had to haggle for quite a long time, ended up spending just under 2,000 to bring them in, a very worthy price as far as I'm concerned, because this means Saphrax can now take advantage of the full stack of Illyrian troops right next to him to protect himself from the full stack of Romans nearby. If the Romans were already apprehensive about moving into the Illyrian territory, perhaps not wanting to trespass in the last turn, they definitely won't attack now that the Illyrians are at war with them and have a huge stack standing there in their settlement. So all I had to do was decide where to put the Children of Rheims. I was considering crossing the river and sitting on the other side, but it uses too many movement points and I want to be able to camp this turn ideally. So I'm just going to move behind the town because as far as I know the Romans don't have anything to the northeast of this position, and then wait out in the camp, start rebuilding my forces. I'll need a couple of turns and perhaps I'll try and build up the camp itself whilst we're waiting. So for the Stewards of the Divine and Vithericus, it's time to move again to try and exploit the fact that Eastern Roman Empire are probably weak because of the Hunnic attack. I want to move south and then east along the coast towards Constantinople. I'll have to go through the Huns on the way, but I'll negotiate that when we come to it. To start with though, there's this Roman rebel army which happens to be standing in the Visigothic territory, which I'm going to have to get rid of to start my southward journey. This is quite useful. It's basically some experience food. It's a very weak enemy army that stands and fights my horde as I advance up. So Vithericus will just wipe them out to further increase the skills of both himself as a commander and his forces. We take minimal losses, the enemy force is totally wiped out, and I can even take on warriors to actually regenerate a few troops after the battle. So we come off looking pretty good, and now it's time to continue our move south. First, I'm going to storm through the Eastern Roman Empire town of Scupi, which has only a tiny garrison, so again, Vithericus can quickly auto-resolve this result to start training his troops, and this time I'm going to be able to raise the settlement to get some extra money, although the financial situation is quite good as it stands, so I'm not really obliged to be doing this. But since I need to pass through, I need to get rid of their zone of control, so they're going to have to be sacked for now. So I get the money, and now I have to decide where to go. Heading south was my plan through Thessalonica. The only downside to this plan is it leaves me a bit exposed because I don't know what's down there. Even the Huns could be down there. I ended up just moving very slightly. I decided to move and encamp right next to Scupi, so not moving too far. And then next turn I'll have more movement points to move down, and if I see it looks bad, move back up. So that's the plan for those guys. Hopefully the Huns will continue to wreak havoc with the Eastern Roman Empire so they don't come over to attack me sitting in their territory. And now I get a fantastic piece of news. The Huns actually want a peace treaty with me and they're willing to pay. This is coming at an absolutely ideal time. Perhaps it is the will of God, in fact, for the Huns to be offering such a strange deal out of the blue. So I'll certainly accept their offer, take their money, and take much easier passage through the remaining Eastern Roman Empire territory as a result.
Wherever our people travel, they hear of the bravery of Vithericus. Thousands of Roman soldiers lie dead as a testament to the skill of your heroic kingdom. What remains of it, I should say. You know that all you left behind is ours, and has found peace in the service of their betters. Despite your warlike nature, you have earned the chance at the same treatment. We will promise you free passage through the Roman lands, if you will extend the same courtesy to us. And to show our sincerity, I invite you to step outside and witness the riches of our mutual Roman enemy, now yours to aid your journey. I needn't remind you that to decline this offer is to doom what remains of your people.
Some more diplomacy news now. The Gepids, my military ally from the start of the campaign north of the Danube, have declared war on the Alans, and I'm being offered the chance to join this war. I thought it was very unlikely that I'd actually encounter the Alans, so it's probably okay for me to join in this war in order to avoid any sort of disgrace for not holding up this alliance that I have, which is supposedly a long-standing one since we've had it since before the campaign. The Alans are allied to the Vandals, but you can see that the Vandals are miles away. I can't actually see where the Alans are. I think they're just somewhere right next to the Gepids since they've declared war on them. But anyway, I'm going to join this war, but effectively stay out of it, of course, because I've got my own missions to do. I'm just going to be in it in name in order to preserve the reputation of my kingdom. So now it's time to move on into the next turn. Vithericus has his movement points back, so it's time to continue his journey. Because he camped in the zone of control of Scoopy, he has to go in and sack the settlement again before he can move on. Of course, this time it's even easier, just a depleted garrison inside to wipe out. But the good news is that's yet more training experience for the army and him. We only get a tiny bit of money from the sacking since we already sacked it just now, but still, extra money is always useful. So now, where to go? I thought I'll start moving south this time, being careful to keep some movement points in reserve so I can move back if I need to. Unfortunately, as I move, I see the zone of control of Thessalonica is too big for me to move east. I can't move through that forest there. So if I want to move east from here, I'm going to have to actually do something against Thessalonica. I'll have to go in, besiege, win the battle, sack the settlement, and then move east along the road towards Constantinople. Unfortunately, it looked like it was going to take multiple turns to get ready to make this attack, which was rather inconvenient. The labour force of my army wasn't as high as I thought it would be. So it would be quite the delay for me to sit here and take Thessalonica, and of course that delay means that reinforcements could arrive, and I wasn't really up for waiting to see if that happened or not. So instead, I decided I'll just move through the settlement the Huns just desolated. Because of course, now that I'm at peace with the Huns, it's kind of in my interest to try and follow behind their giant and powerful stacks to make sure that they're always clearing the Eastern Roman Empire away, because that way I actually stand a decent chance of getting past the capital region of the Eastern Roman Empire without having to face any massive battles or getting trapped and almost destroyed like Vithericus almost just was. So the settlement here is pretty much deserted, but as I move east I'll probably encounter the Huns and the Romans. Now back to Saphrax, you can see he's regenerated some of his forces. He's probably 1 or 2 turns away from being at full strength, but most of his units are already prepared to fight. But I wanted to delay a little bit more because I'm a few turns away from being able to upgrade all of my spearmen into heavy spearmen, and I'll have a much better time against the Romans' heavy spearmen. So I thought I'll spend a bit of time by going back to this settlement that I didn't attack on my initial journey through the region, just to sack it and take the money. For him it only takes 1 turn to build the ladders he needs to make the attack, so a much better situation. I'll let that siege continue for now. We get news there of an illegitimate birth. I think it's the bastard brother of Vithericus having more bastard children, so our family is getting a little bit diluted there, but that shouldn't be an issue. We still have enough purebred members to continue our royal line. So Vithericus heads down to the river near Constantinople like I tried to do before, this time more confidently. We don't see any resistance, so I'm going to sit on my side of the river just in case I am attacked, and wait until next time to move closer to the capital, where I would expect at least to see some Romans ready to receive our attack. For Saphrax, it's time for an easy auto-resolve assault using protective stance against Sirmium here, just going to wipe out the defenders. We actually took more losses than I expected doing a protective assault, but I guess it is a walled settlement, so you'd expect some losses. So there we go, the enemy totally wiped out, the settlement is ours. I'm going to take over 2,000 in money away from it, very nice, and of course it's training the troops, which is always useful. Now, part of the reason I actually wanted to go and attack Sirmium is because I thought I had a part of a mission to do it. You can see here I've got this mission to raid a settlement or trade route belonging to the Western Roman Empire. I thought that sacking the settlement might count as raiding it, but apparently it doesn't. I guess what I really need to do is go into raiding stance, maybe just stand there for a turn, but I wasn't really that interested in it. I'd rather go back into allied territory and encamp rather than raid to get my own troops back, because of course I'm really looking to leave. I don't want to hang around, I want to get into a condition where I can leave as soon as possible, and it's only a few more turns until I've got the research I need to upgrade my forces, and of course my forces will be at full strength very soon. In the next turn we learn that the Alans have been destroyed, so my allies the Gepids did fine without me. Saphrax is trying to increase his own power, moving up the ranks in the kingdom. Vithericus is going to force people to let him do this. I guess people in his own camp see him as a rival, but to Vithericus, Saphrax is definitely a worthy man who is loyal to his kingdom. He's going to allow him to continue his rise to power. Now finally we move close to Constantinople, and you can see the Huns are standing off against the Roman Empire just outside the walls there. So I'm going to exploit this standoff and just run straight through it, moving right into Asia and beginning an attack on this small Eastern Roman Empire town. Pretty much no garrison like most of the Eastern Roman Empire towns, so we'll just cut them down. So we've actually got past what could be one of the most difficult parts in the journey, getting past the Eastern Roman Empire's capital. I'm now just a couple of turns from getting away from the Eastern Roman Empire's core regions, where things should get a little bit safer, although of course once we hit the battlefront with the Sassanids, we'll probably see plenty of forces down there. I decided to liberate this territory, not sacking it first, so that the liberated army is more powerful. This of course is only really useful to me if I can get them to join war against the Eastern Roman Empire, so I'll try that in a moment. I was also wondering what my next route would be. I could take the direct route through the mountains heading southeast, or I can go along the coast where there's probably lots of easy and juicy targets to raid to get more money. But for now we're going to put that decision off. I'll just encamp next to my new ally to regenerate forces and generate a little bit of money in the camp. So I'm going to go to this new kingdom just called Asia, a Roman style kingdom, and see if they want to join the war against the Eastern Roman Empire, because that would be terribly useful for me, so that I can sit next to them and just be protected the same way that Saphrax is doing with the Illyrians. Unfortunately, after offering them tons of money, there was no way to really convince them to join this war, I guess because they are basically Roman themselves. They don't want to get involved, so that's a shame. You asked for a reason? I can give you several. I miss the spoils as much as you, don't you ever forget that. But you have to see the bigger picture. This world is seeing its last days. The Huns have spared us because they think we're weak and foolish, and because destroying the Empire is far more interesting. But what are we to do when we return home with the second Messiah, only to find we are too late, that the Huns spared no one? The fewer people who call themselves Roman, the fewer heads the Huns will seek. Smaller, more independent cities stand a better chance of surviving until our return, and then of course, their debt to us can be recalled to help rebuild Christ's new world. We're now back with Saphrax in the next turn, and you can see the Illyrian army has moved out to lay siege to Sirmium. So now we're not being protected by them anymore, and we're missing out on the battle action against the Romans, so we might have to move to do something about that. You can see I'm currently upgrading the Children of Weem's horde to the next level, giving them tents instead of shelters, making them a more serious force as a nomadic tribe, a little bit more permanent atmosphere in terms of how a camp is going to be laid out. I need to quickly level up Saphrax before we move out, giving him bonuses that give him more money from sacking income is always going to be a handy idea, and giving him infantry commander is always useful just to increase his stats in battle. So what I'm going to do is move out and just encamp behind the Illyrian army. That way, if they do happen to make an attack, our forces will be drawn in. It's obviously going to be a super easy victory, and we'll just gain a little bit of experience, perhaps even some money from helping them out in this battle. And we'll see if Illyria actually wants to occupy this territory or whether they're just here to raid it like I am. I'm also going to start increasing the size of the force here in the Children of Ym, because soon we're going to have to battle our way through the Roman army, and I think our force as it stands is almost ready to do it. We're extremely close, just one turn away from researching those heavy spears I keep talking about, so we should soon be ready to move. Now back with the Stewards of the Divine, they're ready to move right now. The question is where to move. I can move south, east, or even southeast, but actually to go southeast, which was the way I was sort of thinking of going, I can go east first and go through Nicomedia there. There is a route up through the mountains without a road that will go more directly towards my destination, or of course I can hit Ephesus and hit all the towns going around on the coast there. That's going to be a more difficult route because some of those towns are fortified, so I'll be slowed down a little bit. But anyway, as you can see here, I decided to go east to start with. First, I moved up to the border, saw that there was no Roman garrison here at the small town, so I'll just move over and do the usual quick auto-resolve. I'll use a protective stance. We have a giant advantage, so basically our archers and skirmishers go in, wipe out the enemy, and then the warriors finish off the rest. So we take the settlement with about 100 casualties, perfectly acceptable, the enemy losing over 500. I've got a chance to liberate a faction here, Pontus, but there's also some decent money to be had by sacking it, so I decided to do that first. But I did also want to liberate Pontus here to have another ally, creating more allied territory for myself, the sit-in, and breaking up the Roman Empire. So I don't have any movement points left now, so I'm just going to encamp here, and after this I can move south using that road there to head towards more Roman territory and to get close to my destination. Now, of course, it's going to be very helpful for me if the Pontics would like to go to war with the Eastern Roman Empire, but after a little bit of negotiation, it turns out they don't want to. You can see, I was also there trying to cheekily make them my tributary state. I was wondering that they might accept it, because usually when you create these little factions by liberating them, they're vastly inferior to you in strength, so I thought there could be a chance they'd become your tributary, but in that case, they didn't. So now, as we're going into the next turn, you can see that the Illyrians do stage an attack on the Roman city of Sirmium. So I'm going to help out, joining them in the battle. They don't really need me, of course, but at least I'll get a little bit of glory, a little bit of experience by taking part. So minor casualties all round. The Romans got wiped out, and I can regenerate 1% of my troops by taking on warriors, so we're pretty much back to where we started. So now it's time for the Children of Ym to move again. The Illyrians, after that battle, didn't take Sirmium, and as you can see, they moved back to their home territory. You can also see I finally did that upgrade. We've now got Germanic Spearmen upgrading from tier 1 light spears to tier 2 heavy spears, a nice big jump that should make my mainline infantry that much more powerful. So I think it is time for me to actually start moving against the Romans once again. To start with, I can just move over towards the Illyrian town and sit next to it, perhaps in camp again. So I'll have one more turn of safety, and then I'll start moving out to see where those Roman stacks are located. It's been so long though that they may of course have actually gone off to fight on some other battlefronts, so if they have, then that'll be lucky for me. I'll also complete building my tent camp as I wait there. So next, the Stewards of the Divine are going to start heading south, as mentioned earlier. There's a Roman settlement here which should be ripe for the taking. My general logic in coming through here is that I wouldn't expect to see Eastern Roman Empire armies because they're not really near any of their borders, so the armies wouldn't be hanging around for any other reason. They're probably busy elsewhere, so hopefully moving through here should be easy. I can just sack whatever I want and not see any repercussions. Whether I'm right about that, we'll find out later on. So I'm going to sack the settlement, no liberate option this time, and get some money. Now I do have the option of going east to attack Ankara or just going south. I'll have to encamp in the zone of control and attack this town again to do so, but I can put that decision off for now because I'll just use the rest of my movement points to encamp and move next turn. I also need to decide whether to upgrade my spearmen to heavy spears here as well. It would mean I'd lose a lot of money and be making a big loss if I do. So I wasn't really sure that I wanted to do that, but I guess you'll find out whether I do, and of course see the answer to the more important questions of where this horde's actually going and what enemies it will face in the next episode of The Second Messiah. So that's all for now, thanks for watching. We'll reach the Sassanid battlefront with the Eastern Roman Empire, and Saphrax will make his way towards Attila next time on The Second Messiah.